speaking with composer Jóhann Jóhannsson, whose fantastic score to the film Prisoners made every ear in the industry perk up and listen. This year he is behind the score to the critically acclaimed The Theory of Everything, which is based on Jane Hawking's book about her life with her husband Stephen Hawking. Jóhann, thank you so much for speaking today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, we've never spoken before, so I'd love to know how you got started in music and what made you kind of go to the path of film composing.
Well, I've been playing music since I was a kid, and playing. My first instrument was trombone. Actually, I played trombone and in brass bands and things like that, wind bands, and then I moved to piano and studied piano, which became my main instrument really, and I guess I started writing. As a composer, I started out writing for theater and music for theater, and spent many years in Iceland writing theater music, where I kind of developed my style really, and got the opportunity to write for ensembles, smaller ensembles, string quartets and chamber ensembles and then my first albums as a solo artist were based on music that I was writing for the theater. So like my first solo album Englaburn was a kind of suite that I created out of music that I wrote for a play of the same name, and I think I wrote for the theater in a very cinematic way, and my music has always been very cinematic and very visual. I've always sort of written music in a very visual way, and kind of having images in my head when I'm writing, and the music kind of tends to start with an image, and so it's very natural for me to write, to picture, and then people started once my records got out there, and they started to get licensed for films and things like that, and then filmmakers started to approach me to write for films and to write film scores, and so it was just sort of a slow process, of kind of a very very kind of organic process in a way.
That's awesome. That's really cool how your music spoke to filmmakers and they kind of pulled you into it.
Yeah.
So growing up, did you have any? Were you watch movies? Were you aware of film composers? Did you have any favorite film composers that you listened to growing up, or?
Yeah, film music has always been a huge influence on me. Classical music as well, and rock music, alternative music, electronic music. I have a very wide taste, and it's kind of it's a little bit all over the place. I take inspiration from many. I don't like to limit where I look for interesting music, and but certainly film music has always been a huge influence, and I think I started to notice film music, maybe in my 20s when I started to listen to, Bernard Herrmann, for example, and I started to really notice his music in the Hitchcock films, for example, and just started to, be really seduced by his approach to music and to scoring film, and then Ennio Morricone was a very early influence as well, and many of the sort of the French, European composers, Nino Rota, Georges Delerue, for example, as well, and Italian film music of the 70s was I was really obsessed with that for a while. There's this enormous kind of enormously creative time where there was a lot of fabulous film music being created in Italy, in the 60s and 70s, and East European film music, people like Wojciech Kilar, for example, Zbigniew Preisner, I'm a big fan of, and Michael Nyman also, a huge fan of his, and So all of these, I could go on,
So, I mean, as a composer, as now, you've been composing lots of films. What speaks to you most, kind of, as a musical storyteller? I mean, what about a film jumps at you first? Is it the characters, the editing, the plot, the cinematography? Kind of what pulls music out of you primarily, like initially?
Yeah, I think, like, for example, for the score for Theory of Everything, I was very it was a combination of what attracted me to the project was the combination of the story of Stephen and Jane Hawking, which I've always been fascinated by Stephen Hawking and his as a person and a character and his life and his ideas and his work as well and I read Brief History of Time when I was at university and he's a fascinating person and the idea of his story combined with James Marsh as a director was something that I thought would be a really great project. I've followed James Marsh as a director for years, since I saw Man on Wire, and I've seen many of his films since, films like Project Nim, Wisconsin Death Trip, and his documentaries, as well as his fiction films like The King and Shadow Dancer, and so it was a project that I immediately felt I wanted to be involved in, and when in terms of what inspired me to write the music, and I think this is in general as well, it always comes from the images very much. It comes from the images, it comes from the performances, and the mood that the director creates, and the actors and the cinematographer and everyone involved in creating the picture, and it sort of when you have material that's very strong, like we have on this film, strong performances, really great cinematography and strong direction, it's really great material to work with, and it's very inspiring.
So what kind of conversations did you have with James kind of about the score? I mean, what did he want from you, and what kind of approach did you want for the music to be?
Well, I think it's, what we started talking about very early on was that this is it's a story about a physicist, about a cosmologist, but it's also very much a love story, and it's primarily a love story. It's a story of the relationship between Jane and Stephen, and then Jonathan, who kind of, it becomes this sort of love triangle, and so it's this odd love story, really, that's at the heart of the film, and that's what the music really needed to express and needed to underscore and to sort of amplify, and so it was really about capturing the warmth, the sort of empathy and the sort of the sort of the warmth of the emotion, really, that's present in the story and in the performances, and it's really kind of it's almost like there's these two facets, there's Hawking the scientist and there's Hawking the man, and his relationships, and there's the film touches on both aspects very much, and I think the music does as well. There's parts of the score where we try to express the kind of sense of wonderment and the sense of poetry that you can read in his writings, his sort of sense of wonder, about the mysteries of the universe, and he's very, I mean, I always feel that like theoretical physicists, like cosmology, this is very close to poetry in many ways, and it's it's close to music. I mean, it's something very musical about this work. And so it was a lot of fun to try to express that in music.
So, I mean, the film is, it is very character-based and very emotional. So, I mean, I feel like that could be a challenge for a composer because, sometimes if you do too much musically, it can become melodramatic and can become forced. So was it kind of a challenge not to, I mean, how much work did you want your score to do? How much of the lifting? So was it a challenge knowing when to pull back and when to kind of fit the music in?
Absolutely. That was a big part of the work was basically finding the right kind of the right level and the right kind of temperature of the music. And we James and I talked a lot about this, and we shared the feeling that we should restrain the music. We shouldn't. I feel that music has more power when there's less of it in a way. I don't like films that have wall-to-wall scores necessarily. I mean, sometimes it works, and sometimes it's necessary. But a lot of the time, I think less is more, and it's better to have the music really sort of serve a purpose when it's there, and have it really sort of speak when it's necessary. And we were very conscious of this, and we spent a lot of time thinking about this, and also about where to place the music and to sort of stay within a kind of keeping a certain restraint on the emotionality,
Right.
So the music is there to amplify the emotions, but not to lay it on with a trowel. We have to because then you start to ruin it, and because the emotion is already there, in the acting and in the performances and in the story. So you don't have to say things twice.
Right.
You don't have to say things again with the music that's already there in the picture.
Absolutely. So looking at the film, did it affect your scoring process at all, knowing that the film is based on real people, with people, their actual lives? Did it change the way you approach it, or did you just kind of look at them simply as characters in a story?
Well, I think it affected the other aspects of the film more than the music. I mean, I think it affected certainly the script writing process and the filmmaking process. I mean, it's always trickier when you're dealing with living subjects. But luckily, James had the full support of Hawking himself and Jane, Stephen and Jane, and they showed the film to Hawking, to Stephen Hawking, and when it was sort of close to being finished, and he loved it, and he gave his full support, and also contributed his own voice, his own sort of synthesized voice.
Oh, wow.
Which was a huge vote of confidence, of course, and that was another thing actually, which was fun to do, which was to write around his voice, and there are several, well, at least 2 or 3 scenes where the music is kind of written around, kind of a monologue that he delivers with his voice box, and that was a lot of fun to do.
And so, kind of looking at the film as a whole, was there anything about this particular story that you kind of connected to personally, maybe, as an individual, as a human, that kind of helped push your score to where it needed to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very human story. It's a very, it's a story of about the human spirit, in many ways, and about, I mean, he's a remarkable man and a unique man and a genius, of course. But I think everyone can connect to many aspects of this story, and it's a very human story. So of course you feel a strong connection. I mean, I saw the film as a rough cut very early on without any music, and it was already very powerful, sort of emotionally, and I cried when I saw it for the first time, So it's very strong, it's very strong material that it's easy to connect to, I think.
And it's connecting with everyone else too. People love the film, and it has amazing reviews. So congratulations on all the success as it rolls out.
Thank you.
But also to wrap up, I always love to finish my interviews with this question for composers. So if you could score any film ever made, with no disrespect to the original composer or the score itself, pretending they never existed, what film would you choose?
Uh-huh. That's very hard to answer in a way. I mean, because it's usually the films I like have very, very strong scores, and the reason I love them is because of the scores. They are that's one very strong reason for liking them is the score, and but if you, as you say, as a kind of a thought experiment, if there were no score attached, I would say probably 2001 is a big one for me, and,
oh, wow.
and Tarkovsky's Solaris or Stalker also are very big films for me. David Lynch's Blue Velvet, but all of these films are very, maybe not Tarkovsky, but certainly Blue Velvet and 2001 are the music is so important in these films that it's
of course, yeah, iconic.
It's impossible to imagine them without with a different score, so it's kind of but I mean those are this is more what if you immediately ask me what are my favorite films, it would be those.
Oh, those are awesome answers. Jóhann, thank you so much for your time and for letting us explore your score a little bit and your process, and I really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.